Hi, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Sylvia and Peter talking about mental health in business and a little bit about mental health in general. This time we have looked at in-house counselors or in-house therapists. If you have followed the news, you would see that it's being talked about a little bit more and more that some companies are offering in-house counselors. So whenever an employee has a need to talk to somebody, that somebody is already in the building. Now that's a different approach to the one that we have dealt with a number of times, which is mental health first aiders who are not trained counselors and who can only refer to somebody who is. So the next step for some companies, I know some law firms have done it, some financial institutions have tried this out, is to actually have somebody on the staff who are there to lend an ear as and when necessary. Is that the way forward?
There's loads of pros and cons with this one.
Nasty question.
Yeah, thanks. On a separate matter, there are a lot of organisations that do provide they provide direct access to counsellors and psychotherapists, so they don't have to go through an EAP program, but they are contracted out to an outside source. So an employee could ring the helpline number and have access straight through to a counsellor and a psychotherapist. So that is almost like ring fenced in terms of privacy and confidentiality. But of course, that isn't an in-house psychotherapist or counsellor, which I think is a great idea. However, from an employer's point of view, do they employ someone to sit there and be the psychotherapist or the counsellor? I think a lot of it would depend on the size of the organisation, because given costs, they obviously would not want someone sitting there that's not seeing people every day, that might see 2 or 3 people and then see no one throughout the day. So I think a lot of it will be driven by the size of the organisation, the demand within the organisation. I think in principle, it's a great idea to have direct access to someone within the building. But there are so many practicalities around that. If that person, i.e. the psychotherapist or the counsellor, is on the payroll, how organising and making sure privacy, confidentiality, reporting, all those things, I think is one of those things is a great idea. And in so many things, the why and the what, brilliant. It's the how. In so many things, it's the how that would work in practice, because there are potentially so many pitfalls. But I do think someone having direct access is potentially a good idea. I don't know what your thoughts around that are, Peter.
My immediate thought was, yeah, great idea. And then devil's advocate mentality kicks in and ask, is this just papering over the cracks? Is there something fundamentally wrong, systemically wrong, that would need to change so that the need for an in-house psychologist or therapist, whatever we want to call them, is not there? So are we just accepting a stressful and toxic work environment, and then we have someone who can deal with the crises as and when they arise, rather than doing the preventative work and figuring out what is it that people moan and whinge about and go off sick for, and then fix that? Then you can start to see, do we have a need for an in-house counsellor? That would be my immediate reaction.
Yeah, it's interesting, because as you were talking there, to that point about, it becomes the norm. Is it then sending a message that it's normal, or can be normal? Workplaces are a place where this can happen, and that people struggle. Whereas, surely the message is that becomes, it's not normal to go into a workplace and potentially expect to have struggles. So it's almost sending a different message. I'm similar to you. I'm a great advocate of prevention. So we have all the existing EAPs in place. access to potentially outside counsellors through various external resources, but I'm very much an advocate of prevention rather than let's wait until something, you know, goes down the continuum. So we have to, the curative has to kick in. I'm personally much more in favour of coaching and or mentoring to facilitate people to maintain their okay position for a lot longer, maintain their performance, their productivity longer, and then these other processes in place to catch people if they still end up at the curative end. And I do wonder whether, as you say, whether it's sending a message to install in-house psychologists and counsellors. It's just making it norm, you know, that's what happens in workplaces. Whereas, you know, one should say it shouldn't, but obviously people have stuff going on outside of work and stuff happens. But surely it might be the wrong message that we're sending.
What we don't know, because the articles I've read on this do not mention what that therapist is supposed to actually do. If it is sitting around waiting for someone to knock on the door, or if it's also about training and developing the culture in the company so that he or she would work with the C-suite, for example, to help them understand the importance of people and how to treat people, so that there's an educational part of it. And then also, if someone is at crisis point, he or she can step in at that point. I don't know how that role is being defined and deployed, but only a certain size of company would be able to do that anyway. So for me, it's about allowing the same freedom to go and seek help outside, like dentists and doctors and physiotherapists, and take the stigma away. And that's right, okay, mental health is not good, because it does not necessarily have to be work-induced poor mental health. It could be bereavement, it could be accident, it could be all sorts of things, nasty diagnosis. But we need a place of work that is flexible and understanding. So we have to be careful that we don't think that going to work will make us sick. Not necessarily, but when we are unable to work at full speed or at any speed at all, it is nice to have a place of work that appreciates us enough to give us the support when we need it, whatever that might mean, and then ease us back in again.
Because I know a lot of organisations through their healthcare plans, through their private healthcare plans, have got the ability to seek mental health support through their healthcare plans, which again maintains its privacy and confidentiality. But also another angle is taking care of the psychologist or the counsellor themselves. If they're in an organisation, a big organisation, where they have lots of people to see, lots of people knocking on their door, how many people would they be expected to see in any one day? You know, if you've got 10 people waiting to see you, you know, can a psychologist or a counsellor see 10 people in any one day? What's the pressure going to be? No, exactly.
The answer is no. And I was in a situation a year or so ago, probably more now, time flies, where I was asked to do a proposal to come in and do in-house counselling once or twice a month or something like that. And they wanted me to be there during the working hours. And they didn't like it when I explained that I couldn't actually fill my whole day with back-to-back counselling sessions. I too needed a loo break. I too needed a lunch break, and a bit of clearing my head from one person to the next. And it then, I think, became prohibitively expensive for them, because they thought, oh, let's get this guy in on a day rate and pump out as many sessions from him as we can. And I never heard back from them after a couple of attempts. They had to have a rethink. And if they found somebody else who thought he or she could do it, good luck to that person. But it was a great initiative. I liked the initiative.
Yes.
And I think part of the reason why it also failed was it didn't come from the top. It was being sold up through the chain. And I got the feeling that somebody at some point looked at a budget and said, nah, not doing it. So those who can afford to do something are more and more doing it, I think.
Mm.
Then there are those who can afford to do it but think they can't because they won't, because of the bottom line and shareholders and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So it's a lot about attitude. And I think if you have the right attitude, you can do a lot of things before you call in the counsellors.
Mm. Mm. And it kind of, I suppose then it comes back to what so many people have been talking about for years is culture change.
Mm.
And again, it comes back to the how. With so many things, the why and the what, we all get that in all sorts of things, but it's the how we make that change. The culture that it's okay to go and talk to someone about whatever you need to. And there is then no repercussions. There is no, oh, Peter went to see so-and-so the other day. Did you see that? And all that sort of rumour goes around. It should be, oh, Peter went to see so-and-so the other day. Good on him.
And
it's but having the in-house ones, I think it's a great idea. But I think hell of a lot more work needs to be thought through how to make that happen. And as I say, and the care of that person in that role as well. Because as you say, they can't do back-to-backs. It's not like having back-to-back business meetings. It's very, very, very different. Very different.
And you just mentioned the rumor mill. And again, this is not about employer-employee. It's about human beings.
Yes.
Because a lot of the nasty stuff happens at peer level, where people are being nasty to each other in the workplace. It's not just the boss who's being an idiot. It's not just the business owner who's being, greedy or whatever. It is also those at your own level who treat you badly. And if you then are seen as having a chat with whoever the in-house therapist is, I can just imagine some kind of stuff flying around behind somebody's back. So I think this is a nice initiative, but could it be too early perhaps? Are we still at the educational stage of this whole mental health in business debate? We want to do a lot, and you and I know, are frustrated that we can't do more, that not more people are queuing up outside our doors to want our help. But I think it takes a lot of what you and I are doing around the edges and the middle, sometimes educating and advocating before it catches fire and then something happens. It was the same thing with physical health in the workplace. That wasn't looked at all until it was, and then it was ridiculed for a while, and then it became the norm. So maybe you and I are just impatient. I don't know.
Possibly. And I'm picking up on the point you just said there. I actually don't want people queuing up at my door. I don't want to fall. I personally, what I do, I'd like to be almost like be redundant. I don't want people queuing up at my door, because that to me is they've gone to a place where they need my support or need your support. I want them to be okay. I want them to maintain their mental health. So I think a lot of it is around the education of encouraging people to look after themselves, maintain their mental health, know what mental health is and what it isn't, spot those signs and go and seek support, whether that's through a coach or a mentor or potentially someone else. But I think it's a great idea having in-house psychologists or counsellors. But I think there's, as I said earlier, a lot of work needs to be done to work out, is there the demand for it? Rather than having those, is it better to have a mentoring scheme or a coaching scheme? Because we already have a lot of organisations already have the mental first aiders as signposters. So I think it's really a wait and see what happens on that one.
Just to clarify, the long queue I wanted was the queue for the preventative stuff.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it's the same thing. So it's saying as a therapist, I don't want people at my door like you don't. You don't want people at your door.
The more we can teach some people to prevent other people from turning up would be great. Yeah. Now, we've been back and forth over this one, Sylvia, and as usual, we don't come up with a clear-cut conclusion, because I don't think there is one. But it's always interesting to hear what our viewers think. And if you think we've got it completely wrong, or if there's a massive point that we've just totally missed, let us know. tell us your story, tell us what you want to add to this conversation.
Mm.
So thank you for sticking with us, and continue your break if you are on one, and I shall go and have another coffee. Take care.
Yeah. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye.